one of the missed opportunities for venues that is sometimes overlooked is if you are a wedding venue and your primary audience and business comes through wedding events, thinking about the people that are in the room and what other events they might be looking to host. It's such incredible exposure because, the guest lists and the curated guests that are experiencing your venue, they all have their own, not only weddings, but business opportunities, special occasions, especially, if you're in a destination and people are traveling for a wedding to experience this location and these venues. There's a lot of opportunity for someone to be in the room and say, you know what, I would love to have my birthday here, or I would love to bring my team for an offsite.
Welcome to the Venue RX. On this show, we document and share best practices around owning, operating, and managing world-class wedding venues.
What's up, everyone? Jonathan here with the Venue RX, and today we are talking all about experience. We're talking hospitality, and we are talking corporate events. So this is going to be a little bit different than what we normally focus on with weddings, but I think it's a very important part of your venue business. And as a venue owner, or as really anyone in the events industry, tackling that corporate piece and making sure the hospitality component of that corporate piece is extremely important. And so today I am so excited to welcome Cassie LaMere to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, really looking forward to our conversation. Thank you for having me.
Oh, this is going to be great. Like I kind of mentioned just there quickly in the intro, kind of the corporate side of things, I think is a little bit elusive for many venue owners. And depending on where their venue is located and the style of venue that they have, there may be some key advantages for some folks, but also some disadvantages and maybe some things to think about if you're just getting into the event space and you want to have a venue designed to be able to service corporate needs, to be able to keep some things in mind. So I'm excited to cover that, but everyone knows if you've listened to the show for any amount of time, I love a good origin story. So can you tell me a little bit about how you got started with your company? Even take me back before the company, prior to 6 years ago and you starting, what was your professional background and how did you get to doing your business now, your agency now?
Well, young Cassie was born ready to entertain. So there is family videos of me at a very young age setting the table and wanting to bake a cake and make it a special occasion. So I truly believe this is something that has just kind of been intrinsically in me from the very beginning. I always sought out opportunities to plan events and to make, occasions meaningful. So it, naturally makes sense that I kind of went on this path. I certainly had some experiences that were formidable for me during my teenage years that I have shared, some unfortunate circumstances where I experienced a lot of loss in a short amount of time and really put things in perspective for me about how important events are and milestones and why we should really see the opportunity to celebrate and gather when we can, because, a lot of times, unfortunately, people's journeys are different. And some of, my friend were not going to have the opportunity to have their 16th birthday or to have their dream wedding. And I saw the impact that had on their families and our friends. So that's something that really is kind of like the driving force between why I'm so passionate about making an event an ultimate experience, is because it's really about so much more than a beautiful event for me. It's about the intention behind it. And I believe that at the end of our days, our memories are rooted in these experiences that we've had together. So, I've only in the last couple of years kind of connected those dots about that being a driving force and a mission for us. Obviously, also kind of addressing the trauma that was, a part of that. So it's been great to have a greater understanding of my purpose. But after, many years of doing events here and there, pursued it professionally, working in fashion and with some well-known luxury brands in-house as part of their corporate experiential team. So I've spent several years on the, corporate side dedicated to a brand, working, on brand identity experiences and on lifestyle events. And then 6 years ago, started Cassie LaMere Events as kind of that next step that I had always envisioned for me in my career. But all along the way, the common thread is experiential brand identity, lifestyle experiences, really highly detailed luxury events. And then also, for us now, as I was sharing with you, I love the diversity. If we do corporate, social, and weddings, we are definitely an agency of record for our clients. So when they host something, they use us for all of their events. A lot of our clients are business owners, entrepreneurs, C-suite. So we'll, be brought in on the company corporate side with them. And then we'll also handle their personal milestones and special occasions. And that's a really special place to be in, to have that trust and, that kind of ongoing relationship through those different, stages in their life journey.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you mentioning that, like the loss piece, because I think that that's something that as people who are in this industry, we don't often tie it back to, and you don't know, like we don't know what tomorrow holds, right? And so when you're planning an event, taking away kind of that transactional piece of the nuts and bolts and kind of keeping in mind the vision of what you're trying to craft and create, I think is so important. So I just appreciate you starting with that. And I think on your website, I don't have it pulled up right now, but I'd encourage everyone to go and check out Cassie LaMere Events and just kind of everything you have to offer. We'll have links in the description, but I believe it says, something about designing events for a life well lived. I want to say something like that. And I love that. Like that I think speaks really to the heart of hospitality. And you've been featured in so many publications. I believe you're speaking at Wedding MBA this year, as you were letting me know. And if you're going to be there, check out Cassie. What are you speaking on, actually?
I'm speaking on trends in the wedding attire industry, which I'm very excited about. So fashion with gowns, tuxedos, and we're talking about trends, forecasting, how to look at predictions, kind of drawing on my years in fashion and, some of my various experiences. I'm very big on looking more into forecasting and predictions as opposed to trend guides. And so talking about that difference and how you can be looking ahead to be one of the first to do something as opposed to, kind of on the tail end of the wave. So
totally
looking forward to it.
Trend setting versus trend following.
Exactly. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I'd love to start there. So in terms of trends that are happening throughout the industry and kind of as you've been in your career and seen trends evolve and change, specifically when talking about corporate events, have you seen any big shifts in the industry kind of from your corporate in-house experience to now running your own agency? Are there some big shifts that have occurred? And if so, kind of what are they and what should venue owners and really at a more macro level event business owners be mindful of?
Yeah. Well, I've been doing this for over 15 years professionally. And then, as I said, with my agency for 6. So been at it a while, kind of seen it all and weathered many a storm. I do think the landscape changed, obviously, during the pandemic, especially for corporate events. Obviously, weddings and social events, we were able to figure out ways to host those in different iterations. And then as soon as we were able to come back, we had that surge, right, of weddings and just the craziness that was everybody taking whatever date they could get just to, kind of play catch up. And then corporate, I think, has been obviously we had virtual events, we had ways of continuing their experiences, but it's been I think the one that's shifted the most as far as like what it looks like post all of, that experience. It's very different. I think there's people that are not as willing to make those commitments as far out. Like I've seen the timelines being shortened on the planning process overall. There's also some other external factors, I think, that play into that, obviously, with different things that we're dealing with the cost of goods and then, the ability to, bring teams to one location. And then also just, I think that they're revisiting what those experiences look like. I personally, where we shine and what we really geek out on is more on what I was saying about the lifestyle experience. So what I qualify that as is There's conferences and there's, those types of events, which a lot of people do really well. And we know that formula. But what we're more focused on is either the surround events around a conference, like if executives are in town and you want to provide some hospitality and, exclusive experiences for them, or also brand activations, pop-ups, product launches, VIP and influencer events. Like that's more the space that we are specialized in, and where we see corporate being is like you were talking about, the experience, the brand pop-ups, the takeovers. I love like a one night only takeover of a venue, or if they've, launched some sort of members club that, has a connection to the brand through an experience with, a food and beverage partner, and also the trips that, companies are doing where they're taking influencers and taking them to a destination and creating this whole weekend of experiences. So that's the shift that I've seen, is like, how can we do meaningful events where we convey the philosophies and the ethos of the brand? How obviously we can get exposure, impressions, but doing so in a way that is a lot more authentic. And as you said earlier, not being transactional. So there's just been a huge shift, I think, in how brands are approaching. And also there's so much noise. So how do you differentiate and, stand out amongst all of that too, I think is a real challenge that a lot of people are facing as well.
For anyone who's not aware of how big this market is, I think in a sense, everyone's familiar with those large format events, right? The big conferences and conventions and things like that. But those secondary events, I'm just calling them secondary events, the kind of events that come from the events, right? How big of a market is that?
It's a huge market. There's so many opportunities, especially if there is kind of this larger event that's bringing people to a location. There's so many opportunities to kind of add on to that and have these breakout experiences, or, these moments around that larger event, whether it be a festival or a conference, for brands to activate or to provide like an intimate, exclusive experience for people who are already going to be, in town for that. So I think it's something that is, a lot of opportunity. And especially if you're a venue that is in a location where an event like that is happening, being able to position yourself as a location that's available, for these experiences, and kind of looking at what traffic you're already going to be getting to your site. And yeah, like to your point, a lot of people might not be able to host the 1,200 person, 2,000 person conference. So they may not see where there's an opportunity for them to be a part of that, particular gathering. So there are some like ancillary things happening that I think, are interesting. And you've seen models of that with the Super Bowl that happened recently, or, I'm based in Austin. There's a lot of great South by Southwest, festivals happening here. With the Oscars are coming up, not to date our conversation, but the Oscars are this weekend. Then there's a lot of, studio houses and brands that are having events around that.
I love that. Just to kind of tie it into some of my own personal experience. So we did staffing prior to doing venue management, and we worked I would say the bulk prior to us kind of moving away from the staffing model, we did so many brand events, like smaller events that came from Stagecoach, Coachella, Comic-Con. We also worked Comic-Con. We also worked some of these larger format events. But for example, like with Comic-Con, we maybe sent 50 or 100 staff members to the location, at least the one in San Diego. And then we'd have any number of 5 or 10 different like breakout smaller events from specific brands, a Jack Daniel's event, or, a fashion event. And they would bring in influencers, and we were doing the staffing component of that. But like you said, and for venue owners listening out there, or someone who wants to get in this industry, if you are in a market that is regularly hosting those, like Austin or LA, positioning yourself to be a venue or be a house for some of those smaller kind of bespoke events, I think is a really cool angle to consider. So Cassie, kind of help break this down a little bit. Let's say someone's out there and they are in one of these markets. Let's define that actually. What are those markets? What are kind of some of the biggest markets for these types of?
Well, you touched on a few. I know you and I have the California, LA background. So obviously New York, I would put Austin in that category. Chicago, we're seeing a lot happening in Palm Beach. I would definitely there's so much energy and traction happening in that area. Then there's, where we also see, obviously the East and West Coast get the bulk of the major events, but there's a lot of other markets that are driving a lot of that influence. I told, we spend a lot of time in Colorado. I would say, I'm probably forgetting someone, and then of course, Northern California as well with, Palo Alto and, out in Woodside in that area, we have see a lot of tech opportunities and events and in wine country as well. Just to name a few. And then Texas, you've got Dallas, Houston, San Antonio's up and coming, in, the conference space. And then, there's a lot happening in our backyard.
Yeah. Well, especially being in Texas, the population explosion with Florida, Texas, some of these states, even Idaho, I know. Are there markets?
Atlanta too, sorry, obviously, and Miami and everything that's happening there. That's huge, booming. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious, are there any markets that are maybe previously weren't considered event destination locations that are now kind of emerging, that maybe there's an unmet need there, just from your vantage point planning some of these events?
Yeah. I see a lot of interest in, we get a lot of comparison to Nashville, Austin and Nashville are pretty similar. And I think there's also a lot of growth happening in Knoxville, which we're interested in. We spend a lot of time at Blackberry Farm in Tennessee, which is just outside of Knoxville. But that's definitely, the Tennessee market is something that is interesting to us. Charleston is always a great destination that we work in. And, I'm seeing more and more things pop up there. Also, looking at the Midwest and, how much influence there is there and brands that are, headquartered in Ohio or in Minnesota. I'm a Midwest girl. That's where I'm from originally. So, I don't want to rule out and leave out, all of the events, even in Missouri that are happening, obviously, with the Chiefs' dominance in the Super Bowl. There's been some really cool events over the last few years in Kansas City. But I definitely think those are a few of the emerging markets for us that we're watching. And then we're seeing, of course, we spend a lot of time in Mexico. That's really accessible for a lot of our clients. So that's a great space. Trying to think of what else we're really excited about that's up and coming. Of also Jackson Hole and some development happening. With everybody loved Yellowstone and that vibe, right? So the Western Ranch experiences, a lot of brands are tapping into that as well.
That's such a good perspective. And I think that's really cool hearing, because it's not just kind of the larger markets that everyone knows, LA's and New York's of the country, but it's also some of these other kind of up and coming markets. Could you just give us a quick breakdown of what your company does from a very practical standpoint? Why do people hire you and what do you practically do for?
Mm-hmm. We're full service within the event space. So we'll handle everything from initial concepts and ideation for your event all the way through execution. So you'll work with our team through every step of that process. And we're really guiding our clients on the hundreds of decisions that need to be made and helping them navigate those options for consideration, what the style of the event is going to be, all of the vendor selection. We really pride ourselves on how we hand select our teams for each event and really tailor that vendor team to the specific needs and vision of that event. And I think that's one of our keys to our success is our network of relationships and the knowledge we have of who is in the market and who we bring in. It's kind of like matchmaking, in a way where I know what the vision is for this event and I'm hand selecting the experts that I want to bring in to really take it to the next level. And I certainly think that you can see that difference in our events. So as much as we love having an A team of people that we work with often, it's also for me more about personalizing that to each specific event and not, falling into this trap of being formulaic or, kind of this rinse and repeat. And especially because we do corporate, social, and weddings, those definitely, there's some overlap, but then in a lot of ways, there's unique needs for each of those. So I'm picking my team based on who has expertise in that specific area. But we're all in. We're basically, a concierge white glove service with our clients. We are boutique in our agency design. So we take on a select number of events a year so that we can provide that high touch, highly detailed level of experience with our hosts and our events. And as I mentioned to you, we are typically the agency of record for our clients. So we work with them on their professional events and their personal events. So I love maintaining that diversity within our portfolio so that we can meet those needs in various areas of their life journey.
Practically, that would mean like you might do a event for an executive group of an organization, and then you might also, one or two of those executives, if they wanted to throw a dinner party on a boat or something else, you'd be positioned to kind of help them execute that. Am I hearing that?
Exactly. A lot of our clients are executives or entrepreneurs and business owners in their own right. So they utilize us for their corporate events and then also, their milestones, special occasions. I also think one of the missed opportunities for venues that is sometimes overlooked is if you are a wedding venue and your primary audience and business comes through wedding events, thinking about the people that are in the room and what other events they might be looking to host. It's such incredible exposure. Because, the guest lists and the curated guests that are experiencing your venue, they all have their own, not only weddings, but business opportunities, special occasions, especially, if you're in a destination and people are traveling for a wedding to experience this location and these venues. There's a lot of opportunity for someone to be in the room and say, you know what, I would love to have my birthday here, or I would love to bring my team for an offsite. So that's one thing I think with venues that, as you're kind of reframing how you think about what clients and what types of events might be a fit for your location, remembering the opportunities you have when those guests are in the room to showcase, what you can offer and, have someone be introduced to your venue for a future experience.
Such a cool perspective shift. Because if you think about, if your focus is on the couple, obviously you want to, surprise and delight them and take care of them and their family. But then there's also this secondary group of potential clients that are showing up and they are business owners. They do, they are brand managers. They have all these other things. And so what postcard are you putting in their mind of the experience you're able to offer? I love that. A couple things, as you were saying, there's so many things that were running through my mind. So kind of off the cuff question I'm just curious about. Let's say you're in a market that you're not super familiar with from the standpoint of knowing vendors. Like maybe you've got a catered and maybe you've got F&B and you've got some of these things, but you need an ice sculpture vendor. How do you go about finding those vendors that maybe you need, but you don't yet have that relationship with in a specific market?
Yeah. Honestly, that's what I spend a lot of my time doing is that research and that development of different markets and vendors. And I call it the archive. I'm always storing away ideas and partners that I don't even know. I know there will be an opportunity in the future for us to work together. I don't even know what it is yet, but it's really an important part of what I enjoy about my work is the constant in search of new ideas, new partners, new locations, and I'm filing that away and building this like mental archive. And so when the opportunity presents itself, I already know like I'm going to pick this, I'm going to pick this, like those ideas immediately come to mind. So a lot of that is that resource library that I'm building and continuously like, it's the curious part of me, right? Like traveling and visiting destinations and seeing the best of the best and knowing that we have that information when the opportunity presents itself. But then also, relying on connections and relationships that we do have. So if there is someone that we're looking for that we don't have, a particular partner already in mind, getting those referrals from, our industry peers, reaching out to them to see who they've had a good experience with is often where we'll start so that we have some sort of, kind of context into their working style and have confidence in that partner, as opposed to just, kind of searching for something blindly. But a lot of these industry events that we attend serve that purpose of getting introduced to new vendors and when we're in a market, it will be a mix of using local vendors, but we will also, have vendors travel in and bring in teams. So where you're located is one piece of it, but it's also not necessarily the determining factor because we have the ability to bring teams in to wherever we're popping up.
I love that. So I hope, if you're a venue owner or you want to own a venue, there's a couple things to me that really stuck out to what you said, Cassie. First, if Cassie's going to your event or she's going to your venue, you better make sure she's having a good experience because she might put you in the archive, right? That's the first thing. But I'm curious, like, what are some of the things that are kind of turn-ons or turn-offs for you when you're looking at some of these vendors? And I kind of want to bring that full circle because as a venue, obviously we can't pick up and move our venue to different places, but you can bring different events to different places. And I would imagine if you visited a location and it's right outside of Nashville, and then you've got a client that is looking for something outside of Nashville, then you're like, oh, I'd love to have explored that a little bit more. But what things to you stick out that kind of make you put that venue or that vendor in your mental archive is like, hey, bookmark, go back to that one at some point?
Yeah. And that's definitely the process in a lot of ways. Like when we get the creative brief from a client, we may know what type of event they want to do, but we don't have a location. Like they're open to our recommendations for different destinations and cities and locations. So we're often shaping that decision. And like you said, finding, I know the perfect place and it's in, Santa Fe or wherever it might be. So a lot of times I just want venues to know that when that conversation is taking place, it's not always already predetermined the city in which it's going to happen. So as you said, like having that knowledge of what's out there and available and what would be the perfect fit for this particular event, things that stand out to me, I'm going to have an attention to detail. So I'm going to look at, if I am in your space, like how you've executed the hospitality, the guest experience part of it is going to be really important to me. And then also looking at how the venue is maintained, is very important. If there's little things that have been missed, that to me is an indication of you're not really focused on, all of those, the level of like how we need things buttoned up and polished and just the expectations and the standards that we have with our clients. That can be an indication of like, there's just kind of a different point of view there. I'm also, my biggest thing is I want partners that will find a way to say yes. I think the mentality piece is so important. A lot of times when we work with specific venues, we're immediately met with no. And with corporate clients, especially, they're looking for some customization, some personalization options that if we can find a partner that's willing to just get creative with us and figure out solutions for meeting this vision. And on our end, we're coming to the table with the resources that are required to do that. We understand that a lot of these requests come with a certain level of investment, and we're great with that. But then finding the partner that is, willing to consider these alternative ideas so that, we can come in and like truly personalize and customize the experience for this client. And then, as I mentioned, I can't stress enough, like the hospitality piece and knowing, there's just a certain level of service and also the way that your team approaches those connections and the way that they interact with guests that I'm going to be very mindful of. And a lot of the venue open houses, I just feel like kind of miss the mark. I don't know about you, but you have to deliver value, and you have to make something a meaningful use of someone's time. And with going to so many of these events, and if you're kind of just following that formula, like I talked about earlier of, we're going to put some drinks and some apps out, and we're going to, it becomes something that is not impactful. So how can you, if you have the opportunity to get people into your space, like how can you wow them, or how can you show them something different that will really, make you stand out, as opposed to having people attend an event that's, kind of, well, it was fine, but, I'm not really sure that I took anything away from it that really added value or made me want to go back. Right.
Cassie.
Yeah.
Can I drill in a little?
Yeah.
I'm curious. There's been this, I think, like surge, and maybe it's kind of going away a little bit, but it was kind of old school weddings and even events were like ballrooms, right? It was like weddings were a lot in the church, and then like the auxiliary room, and I'm talking like 10, 20 years ago, right? And then corporate events were in ballrooms, or weddings were in ballrooms. And then there was like this whole push towards alternative styles, and then barns. And then, like everyone's like, oh, we're coming from California. It's like, can we go to like Joshua Tree and, do like a whole glamping wedding? And then, can we and let's do a barn wedding. Let's do this. Let's do that. A lot of that. And then blank canvas venues certainly have made a huge, entry in the market. With the blank canvas though, you're putting a number of elements of hospitality, food, beverage, and rentals sometimes, in the hands of the client, who may not be appropriately prepared to execute on an amazing hospitality experience. So speaking to those blank canvas venue owners right now, what are some things that maybe they can do to kind of help elevate the impression of hospitality that they're giving, even if they're allowing a client to bring in their own caterer, or bring in their own rental company, or bring in their own bartending company? What can they do to kind of like up the hospitality level so that when you walk in their space, you can tell, hey, there's intention here, without saying, oh, I don't love this caterer, and that was a choice of the client? Do you see what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, there's a time and a place for each type of venue. Like there's times when we need the blank canvas, and that's what we're really looking for, to be able to build what we want. And then there's times when we need a venue that's already a great experience, and we just want to come in and enhance it and provide some, additional details. I think for the blank canvas, I mean, if you're hosting an event where you're bringing in other partners, obviously that's an opportunity to showcase the partners that you feel like aligned with your standards and your, perspectives on execution. But I just think in the venue experience itself, like when I'm dealing with the venue, I'm looking at how they're communicating. Are they responsive? Are they on top of, our communications and our plans for our site visit? Great if they have a preferred vendors list. I probably already know who I want to work with. So, that's so great for some folks, but, for us, we already have that figured out. But when we arrive to the space, are we offered a beverage? Are we, is there a place that we can, a lounge vignette where we can sit down and chat, even if it is a blank canvas space? Is there a level of like intimacy, and do you bring a little bit of that, residential experience into it, where I feel like I'm kind of being welcomed into a space? And then obviously, like I said, how is it maintained? The venue is the foundation for everything that's going to come in after that. So that has to be, at the same standard. And then, we're going to kind of bring it and layer on from there. But if I always look at the bathrooms when I walk through a venue. If they're not, well maintained, or they're more industrial and not like an experience that we want to offer guests. Just looking at how you're taking care of your home. I mean, your venue, this is your home, right? And so I think that is conveyed more than, yeah, like I said, you have vendors that you prefer to work with, or, you may not have control about who comes in, but I'm just kind of more looking at who is going to be my partner in this, and how do they, do we share similar values and code of conduct? Do they get it? Like, do they understand the level that we're trying to deliver? And then also, are they, being helpful and accessible during that process? But if we're kind of met with like, this is what you can and can't do, and these are the parameters, and this is, and it's more, I guess more transactional, or more just like, we are what we are, we're not really willing to consider things outside of that, then we know that it might not be like creatively a fit. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. And I'm really glad that you made the distinction between the vendor partners and then what the venue can actually do. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at a venue and it's like, we want to do amazing events. Like, I'll hear that from the owner, or maybe even a client, a management client that we're considering working with. And they're saying, I want to do amazing events. I want to do, really large events, or I want to do corporate events. And then we look and the bathrooms are just terrible, not well lit. Right. Like, and it could be intentionally not well lit, but like, I think there's a level of intention there that they're designing it for a certain experience versus accidentally like, this is what we have. And then the rule piece, I think I like what you said about finding ways to say yes. Like, not, no, we don't do that, but like, we are able to do that. We are able to allow you in a little earlier. We are able to do this. Like, it will cost a little bit extra, but when you're coming to the table and you're trying to create an experience, it's not about the cost. It's about achieving the dream, achieving the vision.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was saying, is like, we understand that comes with a certain level of resources and investment, and we are managing that part on our end with our client. And we wouldn't be bringing something to you if we didn't have that support and that, that infrastructure in place. But just understanding when we go to a venue, what they're willing, because a lot of what I know you wanted to talk specifically about corporate, like, they're looking for the ability to take over a space. They're looking to be able to brand it, to be able to make it a totally different experience. So we need to be able to know, what can we do? Can we vinyl? Can we paint murals? Can we get a car in here? Can we be in here for multiple days? What are like, there's so many different questions that we're going to be asking to be able to execute that type of experience, that your couples are not going to be, having the same qualifiers. And then also, don't take for granted the fact that a lot of times this research has been being done remotely. So what tools and resources do you have available to potential clients to be able to explore your venue through decks, floor plans, virtual tours? Do you make that easy on the client who's inquiring about your venue? Because like we talked about earlier, I might be looking at multiple markets. So I'm reaching out, and I'm here in Austin, but I'm talking to different cities. And what's the package that you're able to share with me, so I can get a sense of the venue, at least for that first round of kind of research from, not being on site.
Almost digital hospitality. Like, digital side of the drink that you're being offered, the lounge set that you're sitting down in to look at the space or talk.
Like, I can't tell you, this just came to mind. I just want to point this out, like, how many times I get a very generic email back where I've taken the time to, share information with you about our event and our needs. And it's obvious that I'm kind of getting this like templated response back from the venue. And it may even ask questions that I've already addressed in my previous communication. And, I just don't feel like they're taking the time to, and I understand you get a lot of inquiries. So do I, right? We get a lot of event inquiries, and, I know there's great tools available. Like, a lot of our venues use Triple C, and for a lot of communications and resources, but how you're tailoring that communication to show that you're paying attention to those details from the very beginning. I think is an indication for us of as far as like what this relationship is going to look like. Because if you're already not getting some of those details, like that's going to be how this whole experience is going to be, right? How you do one thing is how you do everything. So from the very beginning, having a partner that's on point and is customizing that information to for our specific needs. And then also all of this is just a lot of people just don't want, it's a lot of work, right? I get it. Like for venues and for staffing, it's a lot of work. And some people just don't want to have to put in the extra time and resources and effort to execute on things that are custom or, really, personalized or kind of next level. So that's another thing that I see a lot with venues. And I understand that there's, capacity and bandwidth issues and, staffing is difficult. And, but, that's also just something to consider is like, if you're willing to go that extra step on the corporate side, because I do feel like a lot of those requests are unique, where they're asking you to do different things. I don't want the package. I don't want menu A, B, or C, it's great that you have that. And for some corporate clients, they want it to be turnkey, but I want like a fully customized menu. I want to know what your chef is willing to do, like assuming a venue has, the restaurant component. I want to create something fully. The goal is for our guests to have an experience at your venue that they will never otherwise have. If they were to go back to that venue at any other time, they would have a great experience, but they're never going to have this experience again. So, there's a difference there in like how you approach these collaborations and knowing what you can do and having those conversations ahead of time with your team. So when you are presenting your venue to vendors and planners, you can already highlight some of these things that are maybe unique to your capabilities in-house.
I'm curious about this. Do you find more success working with venues that have more of a corporate management structure in place versus someplace that's like more owner operated? Have you seen like kind of a difference? Do you know what I'm saying? Like with some of the venue brands that maybe they have, like in Texas, I know there's the Springs venues, or there's, Walters. I know they're primarily weddings. There's Wedgwood. There's, Common Sense Events. Our company manages a number of venues. Like, have you seen over your experience working with a venue that does have that kind of corporate management structure and some of those resources in place versus owner operated kind of like smaller, more boutique venues, or that's not as much of a qualifier as it is just getting it, like you said?
Yeah, I don't think it's as much of a qualifier. With the more corporate venues, sometimes we see a lot of turnover. So I may have 3, 4, 5 contacts on a project before we even get halfway through the, event planning timeline, which is a little unnerving sometimes, when you're constantly having to like start from scratch with a new team member and kind of bring them up to speed on everything that you've already planned and developed. So, we do see a lot of that, like staff turnover on that side. And then with the more individualized approach, I think that's lovely, and a lot of times we are looking for something that's totally different and maybe really exclusive. So it might be something where, like right now, we're planning an event in a private residence, and that is something where we're working directly with owner operators, and it's just something where at that level, it's just maybe we don't find that there's as much like advanced knowledge about what options are possible in kind of that kit that I was talking about that's, available to you to have as a planning resource. But since we're trying to do something that's like totally exclusive and different, I mean, we're often like unearthing these really rare, unusual spaces. We've built an event in the field from the ground up with no existing infrastructure. I mean, the definition of what a venue is, I think that's probably one of the biggest, when you were asking about changes, is the definition of venue as expanded well beyond, the traditional idea of, walls in a building or space. A venue can be anything. And especially when we're getting into destination locations where we're planning a whole weekend of events, we are taking guests to some remote or exclusive locations and being able to pop up or create an experience there. So I love I'm going into someone's Tuscan villa and we're doing a lovely al fresco dinner in the garden for executives, and it's a space that is normally a home and, but it's the place and we're coming in and transforming it. So, I mean, anything's possible.
I love that. I think that's one of my favorite things about this industry is just how unique and custom it can be. And if you're listening to this right now and you're like, I would love to do 15 just incredible, unique, different events per year, and you live in one of those markets, that's definitely an avenue that you can pursue. And I will say that I think a lot of local like regulation, county regulations, noise ordinances, things like that have yet to catch up with this kind of unique and creative way that people are thinking about venues and thinking about events. So that's something definitely mindful, but that's such a cool thing about this industry. You can say, hey, I want to do 100, 200 events a year and build a spaces for that. Mm-hmm. Or I want to build something that is more of a lifestyle experience and doing 12 to 15 events a year. Like you can anywhere in between.
Yeah. I mean, we've done events in parking garages, like I said, a field. We've taken over wellness experiences like resorts and spa destinations. We've done, crazy installations in all of these unusual spaces and then I know you were talking earlier, it reminded me of this venue we did that was like this immersive kind of entertainment complex with all these different rooms, and each room had a totally different look and feel and experience. And so, yeah, I think again, like the definition of what is a venue is completely open to interpretation, and it's possible. I like making the impossible possible. So I'm not going to look at something and be like, oh, we can't do that. There's no way. Like I'm going to figure out a way to bring in the resources to build a 5-star resort in the middle of a field. Like we're going to make that happen. So for people who have kind of these alternative, ideas or locations, like we want to know about it.
Definitely. On that note, and to kind of wrap up today, I'm curious if someone is listening to this right now and they're just shouting in their head, like, I've got this place, I'm in the suburbs of Nashville or in Charleston, or I'm in, wherever it is. And I have this place, but I am not getting the traction, or I don't have connections like you, Cassie, and your company. Or maybe, obviously there's other companies as well that do what you do. What's the best way for some of these venues to get in touch? Like, is it a cold reach out? Like what's the best way for them to kind of get some traction on this if they're currently undiscovered and they want to get to being able to be a venue resource for an organization?
Yeah. People reach out to us in a variety of different ways. I think the most successful, engage with us on social media, like, start kind of establish a relationship, get on our radar. A lot of people DM us, and we often, we're going to route you to our email and our contact information. So, DM is kind of I think like that's a space you can easily get lost, so just for outreach, just be aware that, people, if we don't follow your inquiry goes into different, there's the general, the primary, like there's all the different inboxes. And so I know sometimes like things can get lost in the shuffle. So I would say like engage on social. So we start to get on your radar, you're on our radar and vice versa. Then reach out, via email. And I think like what would be successful is looking at, like, if you saw another event that took place that is reminiscent of like what you're looking to accomplish or of your venue, like sharing that photo gallery or that article and be like, this is similar to who we are, what we're looking to do. Because I understand that a lot of venues, maybe you just haven't had that event yet where you have those images to be able to show what's in your space. But if you can kind of set the vision of something that you are excited about or you're looking to do and like how you could be a fit for that, then maybe next time, instead of going to that other venue, you're then on their radar. So I think that's a great way to make that connections when you maybe don't already, have those resources developed yet, if that makes sense.
Totally, totally. What about going to industry events, maybe things like Wedding MBA, but even other open houses, corporate mixers? Like where do we find you out in the wild?
Yes, I'm definitely at industry conferences. So that is where I make a lot of our relationships. And often, those are always in a destination. So either the conference itself is taking us to some of these venues, or there's, people there traveling in and being a part of that. So certainly that's one for us. If you do know that you're a location where a conference is coming through, trying to be one of the venues that they host one of the events at is obviously great exposure. So certainly industry events. And then, I do my best to show up. I try to show up and support. So invite us. And, even if we can't attend, I always appreciate the invitation. And I always say, keep us in mind for future events. So we try to really show up and support and do our research. So a lot of my time, as I said, is spent going to different locations and making sure that we're up to date on what's out there. So I definitely think, including people, even if they're not able to attend, just extending the invitation. And don't do it 2 days before your event, please. I got an invitation the other day and it was like, we're having an event on this open house on this. And it was 2 days later. And I just thought how, I was like, am I reading this right? I mean, you've got to, also be thoughtful about because again, if something is that last minute, I have concerns, so, also just be aware of that, because it's really unfortunate when, and especially if you're putting effort into putting something together and then you don't get the attendance that you're hoping for, then it's, not something that's worthwhile for your time and resources. So just a few tips.
Totally. I so appreciate those. And thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has just been, I've learned a lot, and I know everyone will have as well. And if someone's listening to this and they're just like, Cassie, I want to connect with you. I want to connect with Cassie LaMere Events. I want to know more about you, or maybe even hire you, or, reach out, whatever. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
As I said, Instagram is a great place to connect. Also, we're on LinkedIn, Party Slate. Subscribe to our newsletter. We do an insiders list, really great, a lot of great tips and resources in that content that I think is really valuable and we're very proud of. But yeah, and shoot us an email to continue the conversation. I love connecting and constantly, like I said, in search of new ideas. So I like when people, can get on our radar and vice versa, so we can do something amazing together.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Cassie. This has been a lot of fun, and I'm excited for people to listen to it. And we'll have links for everything that you've mentioned in the description of the video. It'll also be on all the podcast platforms as well. So thank you so much for your time today.
Likewise, thank you.
Hey friends, Jonathan here, and I wanted to share about Common Sense Events consulting packages. If you are a venue owner and you're struggling with your marketing, your sales, your operations, or maybe there's just, you're new to the industry and you want to really have a leg up and get a jump start on getting your business going and not make a lot of the mistakes that oftentimes people make, the mistakes that we made, frankly, when we first started, we would love to chat with you and see if there's a way that we can serve you. Our team has experience working with over 10 venues all across the United States, doing consulting. We've hosted hundreds and hundreds of weddings at this point, and we know what it takes to be successful. If this sounds interesting to you, we would love to chat with you. You can either reach out by filling out the link in the description of the video or podcast, or you can just email us at venues@cseventservices.com, and we would love to chat with you and see if there's a way that we can serve you. All right, back to the show.